there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and today we are rebuilding Lloyd's golden Oni dragon from a dragon into a mech. Now this mock was designed by Ransom Fern, the same person who redesigned the official set UCS Hulkbuster into a much more comic and movie accurate Hulkbuster using just the pieces provided in the set. And now, Ransom Fern is back with another absolute banger of a model with Lloyd's Golden Ultra Dragon mech. And so, join me as we break down this massive golden mech, and if you're interested in building one of yourselves, you can check out the link in the description below. Let's go! Okay, so this is Lloyd's Golden Ultra Dragon mech. It is using just the pieces from the Golden Ultra Dragon set from Crystallized, however, it has been completely reconfigured into a mech-like form. Even though I say mech, there isn't really a space to add a figure in here, it is basically just a humanoid creature, so I guess I would call this closer to like what LEGO did earlier this year with Zane's Ice Dragon creature being rebuilt into a two-legged bipedal warrior instead of just a dragon itself. Now this has been built by the incredibly talented Ransom Fern. You may recognize that name from the person who built the massive redesign of the LEGO UCS Hulkbuster, taking the existing parts of the set and reconfiguring it into something much better than what we actually got. I actually got the chance to meet Ransom Fern in Singapore when I visited recently, and it was really cool talking to him to learn about his mock building style and techniques, and after having a conversation with him that went on for hours, I was convinced to purchase the instructions for pretty much every single mock he had made because they are just so good. Now we already have reviewed Nia's Dragon Samurai Mech, which was a really cool looking model combining the Water Dragon and the Samurai X Mech, and this one is yet another alt build for LEGO Ninjago, this time focusing on the Golden Ultra Dragon. In case you're curious, here's what all the pieces look like all spread out with all the bags opened up all together, and then here's what it looks like with the pieces that are left after you build the main mech, which I was really surprised that this uses up a lot of the pieces, and especially all of the important ones too. Going back to the mech, you may notice that all of the different dragon heads are fully integrated into the mech itself. You have the lightning and ice dragons on the arms, the fire dragon makes up the head, and you even have the earth dragon on the top of the chest here, plus the other lower jaws are even used as shoulder armor and knee pad armor, some of which look really good on the character itself, especially the way that these armor pieces look. Now much like how I handle all of my reviews for large action figure style LEGO builds, I'll be going about this review by starting off with Posability, then talking about building techniques, aesthetics, and finally, does it make sense in universe, which I guess isn't really a point that applies here, so we'll just focus on, do I feel like this is congruent with other Ninjago style of mechs? Starting off with Posability though, let's actually take a look at how this all works. Despite the fact that they were really only utilizing the pieces in the set, I was really impressed by just how much articulation was managed to be included in a build like this. Now, the legs themselves can be splayed forwards and backwards and side to side like so. Unfortunately, you cannot actually rotate them outwards, so you cannot rotate the upper legs outwards, so you can't go like that, but there's a trick because you can actually rotate the knees. This is the first time I've seen that slightly new click joint slash ratchet joint being used in this particular configuration for the knees of a build, and I'm honestly really impressed by just how well it works. It allows you to have that rotational motion without having to use a weak ball joint for the upper legs, allowing it to basically hold its poses, and I'm honestly kind of surprised that LEGO hasn't done that already in an official set. The feet themselves, to conserve stability, only sway from side to side, but thankfully that doesn't actually matter because, again, you do have full ranges of articulation by rotating this particular joint here, so you don't even really need to get it into all sorts of different crazy poses with the feet because it can already accomplish that as is with this particular uses of the joint. Now, this is really cool because you can actually bend the armor backwards and forwards, and you can even get it into kind of a semblance of a walking pose, which is really nice. I like that you can really just play around with the creature and just try to play around with how you actually want to keep it posed and aesthetically aligned. The only major downside for me is that unfortunately the joints, as you can see, are not really strong enough to hold up the arms. Now, thankfully, this can very easily be fixed if you utilize one of the friction joint add-on pieces from Hero Factory CCBS and Bionicle G2. Unfortunately, those pieces are now discontinued. I honestly don't really know why LEGO discontinued those parts because they were really useful in even non-CCBS stuff, like just regular system stuff, use it all the time, but for some reason LEGO has discontinued them, and because of that, the new joint that they introduced just pretty recently isn't really that that strong enough to hold up the weight of stuff like this arm here. With the other arm is kind of okay because it's not holding a sword. It still sways downwards, but not that much. But this arm, really, since it's holding the sword, I would have loved to get it in this sort of a pose. But as you can see, it's just not really going to keep that pose. Now, your mileage may vary depending on the pieces that you use and the joints that you acquire. This is just personally what I've experienced with playing around with this particular joint. Otherwise, though, I am definitely going to modify this, given that this is a custom model anyways. I have no qualms about modifying it, and just adding on those CCBS friction add-ons to allow it to actually keep a pose. That being said, you do have full articulation in the hands, where you can see this is how the hands work, like so. You even can rotate the elbows, so if you want to rotate the arm here and really get it in all sorts of different poses, you do have the option to move that all around. And one thing I really like is that, aesthetically speaking, you actually have the different components of the creature being themed around the elements. There is the fire elemental elements at the top for the head there. You have some ice sticking out of the side here. You've got some lightning coursing on the side of the arm here, and even a couple of tiles that are meant to represent the power of earth on the sides of the torso, which really makes us feel like it is combining all of the elements while still being predominantly gold and white. Rotating it backwards, you may notice that this actually does have full articulation on the back of the wings. I honestly kind of like the way this looks from the back, maybe even more than the front itself. I just feel like it is so clean, and it's very satisfying to actually be able to move the wings up and down. You can actually bend these inwards and outwards, so if you do want to fold out these particular wing elements, you do have the option to do that, so you can actually fold the wings whichever way you want to. But overall, this is, in my opinion, a really cool looking back design for the creature itself, and one that I'm very happy actually does move and bend altogether, because it really does make this feel like it is a moving thing that is alive with wings sticking out of the back. Sure, the wings might not be the most practical. You can only kind of bend them backwards and forwards a little bit, and mostly just up and down, but it's a thought that counts, and I feel like they look really good when you have them furled out like this. That just looks so satisfying to me. Now, moving onwards, I think I knocked off a bit of a piece here, trying to figure out where that goes, but in the meantime, we can just move on and take a look at the rest of the build here. Now, again, I do have to mention that because this is just a model that is built out of existing pieces, it isn't the most stable. One thing that I am usually impressed with the builds by this mockist is how stable they are, and it is pretty stable. But I think with this one, you really do feel that this has been built out of the pieces of another model, not necessarily what it was intended to be. And because of that, there are some strange and interesting parts usages, like exposed clips just tucked away right behind the knees and stuff like that, that feel very much that this is very obviously an alternate build and not really the A model, so to speak, although it is still a really cool looking build. Now, this is a great creature posability. Again, if you just had the ability to keep this arm raised with the sword up, I really would have appreciated that. But again, it just takes a little bit of modification. And then we can move on to aesthetics. One thing I forgot to mention is you can also rotate the waist on a ball joint like so. Now, aesthetically speaking, this is a very gold model, and I feel like the color blocking on this is as good as it could have been given the piece selection. Lloyd's Golden Ultra Dragon is a very pearl gold build. As you can see from the pieces, which it used most of them, the pieces themselves were mostly just pearl gold, giving it a very striking appearance, but also making it such that color blocking, especially with the placement of certain white elements, was pretty difficult, especially to try to make it look good. Personally, I'm really impressed with how the color blocking worked. There are a couple of things that I feel could have been improved. There are brown pieces used here, dark gray and light gray here just due to the nature of what pieces could be used, and somewhat egregiously there are red sockets being used on the sides of the arms here, but again, the builder was working with the pieces available in the actual set, and because of that, the set only came with these red ratchet joints. They kind of just had to work with the piece in that color, so it is what it is. Definitely not a huge deal, and I guess you can kind of say that that red does technically fit in with the color scheme, with the head of the character itself being a very red-oriented thing, but I don't know. I feel like these would have looked much better in gray, and I'm honestly kind of tempted to swap these two joints with the extra joints that I have from the Nia's Samurai X mech, because that one actually did have some red highlights, so I feel like it'll look better if I just swap those pieces. Otherwise though, aesthetically speaking, this is really cool, and I do love how you can get it in all sorts of cool looking poses. It is just very, very flexible in the way that you can move stuff around. Not quite as flexible as some of the other builds, like the Nia's mech build was really, really crazy in terms of the insane posability you could accomplish with a build like that, but you can still get this in pretty interesting looking poses. Again, if those arms are splayed out, I think it would be really, really cool. If you could just keep the arm up like this, that would be a really, really cool pose, and I, again, will be adding the friction add-ons to the arms so they don't droop down like this. That's honestly not bad though. I kind of like this pose. Sure, you might need to kind of hold it up a little bit. Let me see if I can mess around with it. Ah, there we go. That's standing up. Okay, so this, I think, is a cool looking pose for the build itself. Especially the way that it looks very dynamic, and again, very impressed that Ransom Fern was able to achieve this level of posability using the very limited supply of joints available in the set itself. And finally, I think one last point I want to talk about is building techniques. Building techniques for this model were very interesting because, again, the way the joints were used were in interesting and unique ways, especially around the knees and how those pieces attached. There are a couple of things that are a bit fragile, like the armor plating here just tends to fall off pretty easily because it's only attached on 2 studs, but for the most part, given that this is an alternate build, I'm very impressed with how the pieces were used, and I love the integration of every single one of the molded dragon pieces. I personally would have felt kind of bad if we didn't use some of the molded dragon parts because I think they're really cool elements and they can form very unique shapes, and I really appreciate how they're utilized to form knee armor and shoulder armor, which just looks so good. I mean, this almost feels like it is made to be shoulder armor, which is absolutely insane. Lastly, in terms of nailing the Ninjago aesthetic, I really do feel like this does accomplish the Ninjago look and feel. Sure, it isn't really a mech because there is no openable cockpit. That's what the dragon head looks like opened up, so you can't really put a pilot in here. It is supposed to be either a fully autonomous robot or maybe a more organic creature. This could be like a giant dragon warrior or something. Again, it's non-canon, so you can use your imagination for what you want this to be, but overall, I do feel like this nails the design aesthetics of what makes a Ninjago mech a Ninjago mech. And overall, I'm really impressed by this build. I hope you enjoyed our look at this, and that's pretty much all I have to say about the Golden Dragon mech. Stay tuned because there are so many more reviews of Ransom Fern's incredible work coming soon, including this amazing Iron Man that he built just using the pieces from the buildable Iron Man figure and in Arshem's Shadow from the Eternals. So stay tuned for that, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Alright, and with that, we have summed up our review of the alternate model of Lloyd's Golden Ultra Dragon, transforming it from a dragon into a buildable humanoid creature mech. Big shout out to Ransom Fern, who was the nicest person ever when I met him in Singapore. Was so cool getting a chance to pick his brains in terms of his mock building process and learning a lot more about the thought process behind how he designs custom builds. And honestly, after meeting him, that's kind of what inspired me to do these videos because his builds are so good, and I had an absolute blast putting it together. One thing I didn't really dwell on that much, but I do want to call out here, is that the instructions feel like you are actually building a genuine Lego set. There's basically no mistakes. They are laid out very nicely, and as custom Lego builders know, making the instructions is probably one of the hardest parts of making a custom model, so huge shout out to Ransom Fern for doing that. Thanks so much for sharing your building techniques and, of course, talking with me over when I met you, and I hope that you all enjoyed taking a look at this incredible LEGO Ninjago alternate build. Thanks so much, and bye for now.